Okay, next up is Lori Namazi. I'm going to bring her on. Here she is. She's waiting in the green room. And here she comes. Hi, Lori.
Hi, Connie.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's so great to see you.
So you're the first one that we haven't had a major technical glitch to go with. So I'm glad about that. So Lori has a company called Namazi Real Estate Resources. She's a risk management expert and just an absolute delight. I've done a few events with her, and we have a monthly conversation that we have. We didn't have it this month because we're doing this, but Lori, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
So you do primarily, you work a lot with real estate people, but what you do with real estate people is pretty much the same as what you would need to have for general business. You spent some time as a corporate manager or leader for a large firm. How big was the company you worked with?
The company I worked for, we had over 1,800 agents. We had about 300 employees, and we had 25 offices.
So it's pretty comparable to a pretty good sized corporation, no matter what you're doing, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
so
part of my background also includes, previous to real estate, I've been in the real estate space for 19 years, but prior to that, I was in the hospitality industry. I was a restaurant manager and trainer for about 12 years. And I also spent 2 years working in an office for a manufacturing firm. And so I did recognize over time the common thread in the roles I played, but also the responsibilities of the companies. So I'll be able to elaborate further and apply the information I want to share across multiple industries.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when it comes, can you describe what risk management is so that people understand what that entails?
So risk management is putting a plan in place so you can reduce liability, reduce damage, reduce any lawsuit potential, and basically attempt to keep people safe.
Well, that covers a lot of ground.
It does.
I know, and I know in the real estate industry that it's a requirement that you have like an office manual that breaks down all of the components of risk management. Is that something you recommend for all industries?
Absolutely. You know, when you bring on employees, then you have a responsibility to those employees. So whether they're actual employees or they're independent contractors, like is the norm in real estate, you have a responsibility to train them. And so you'll have your training manual. And you also have a responsibility to provide policies and procedures, which these are the rules. So here's our training manual. This is how you do the job. But then here's the policy and procedures manual. And these are the rules of the company. And they will be expanded to include the laws of the state and maybe federal laws as well. But then you also need to have some other manuals. You probably have already talked about this, but I'm in California. I've always lived and worked in California. So we have a lot of governmental agencies that are intertwined in our business. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in, and it doesn't matter what state you're in. You have all of these governing bodies who have a say in some aspect of how you operate. And so in California, you know, we have Cal OSHA, which is the Division of Occupational Safety and Health, and they have requirements for an IIPP, an Injury and Illness Prevention Program. And so if you have a workspace, an office, or a warehouse, you should have these plans in place as well.
So when it comes to how do you handle, when it comes to risk management, how do you handle different types of disasters, both man-made or natural? Do you have policies in place of how you're going to handle? Like, for example, let's just talk about the pandemic for a minute. Mm-hmm. I'm sure at the beginning of the pandemic, you probably didn't have a lot of plans or a lot of ideas of what you needed to do. But now, is that a part of your procedures manual? Has that become a part of that?
Absolutely. certainly with any type of business, you want to anticipate the different types of business interruptions. I know you talk about business interruption a lot, and just different interruptions or different scenarios. An injury, a slip and fall is not necessarily a business interruption, but you need to have within your injury prevention plan a protocol. Who's in charge? What do you do? Do we call the ambulance first, or do we do something based on the scenario? And so absolutely, you need to have these thought out prior to an incident so that you know what to do. That is your plan.
For sure,
and
for sure.
With COVID, you're right. We didn't know. None of us knew. So every company was trying to figure out what to do. Every industry was trying to figure out what to do. In California, we have the Department of Public Health. They issued guidelines. I wouldn't say immediately, because they had to also figure out, okay, well, what do these industries do? How do they normally operate? And within the way they normally operate, what do we need to modify? But absolutely, we have incorporated those guidelines, and they've changed. They were changing rapidly in the beginning. And, I would imagine with any disaster, fortunately, I live in an area where I've not been subjected to any major disasters. But, areas that are hard hit with hurricanes and tornadoes, I'm sure they have the protocols in place all the time, and you adapt as each hour and each day passes by. You adapt to whatever the situation is at hand, because it may hit quickly and continue, or it may move along, and so you just don't know. You have to adapt as you go.
Yeah, that's well, and I also, I think it's really important to take a look at the mitigation. So there's probably procedures in place to say, okay, that you're in an earthquake area. What are you going to do to help prevent, lessen the damage that might happen with an earthquake? If there's a fire, you need to kind of have plans in place to what you're going to do to mitigate that. That's something that's ongoing. That'd be kind of like, how you're going to handle the pandemic. And we're in different phases now. So now we're in this phase, how are we going to handle the risk and that sort of thing? So since you are in California, and since you do have the risk, a pretty high risk of an earthquake, is there anything in your procedures manual that says, okay, if there is an earthquake, this is what we're going to do, or this is how we're going to proceed, or anything like that in your manual?
Absolutely. We have a workspace, so we have protocols for the workspace. Now, granted, a big part of the prevention plan or the execution of the plan relies on training. Because in the middle of an earthquake, we're not going to go to the shelf, grab the book off the shelf, and then read it and figure out what to do. So my responsibility as a business owner and in real estate as a broker, I need to make sure that I've trained my people on these possibilities, on these different scenarios that can happen, so that we can take quick action. And, I was listening to Becky, and she said, stay calm. I lit up when I heard her say that, because I have shared with you in the past, calm is my superpower. And so anytime there's a crazy situation, I've worked in high rises, and, when the earthquakes hit, you feel it. And we all are conditioned to know what to do because we live with it. But the main thing is you have to remain calm. And as a leader, you have to be calm for your people, and you have to remind them of the steps, whatever's in that plan.
Part of the certification class is talking about leadership and who are the right leaders for a crisis management team.
Right.
And, somebody who, it might be a great business owner, a big person, somebody who's motivating and a rah kind of person. If they don't have good organizational skills, and if they are somebody that excites easily, they are probably not the right leader for your crisis management team. And actually, as I was listening to you, I think a really good way to decide who needs to be in your crisis management team, once you figure out who the leader is, they need to be organized. They need to be able to stay calm. They need to be able to think clearly and make good decisions and be able to solve problems. So if you're somebody that is hesitant, wants to kind of do the Ben Franklin back and forth to just make a decision, you're probably not the right person to be on a crisis management team, because those decisions are going to have to be made quickly. If you're somebody that is, well, like, and you and I've had this conversation before in one of our talks about staying calm, and you are the, you're the calmness of the room when you're around. So looking at somebody like that and making sure that that person has the right mindset. You need to have a resilient mindset and be able to stay calm and be able to be the voice of reason rather than the voice of panic. So I think that's really important. But as I was listening to you talk about the manual, that's how you pick your crisis management team. You look at your procedures, you look at the different things that you have to have in your manual depending upon your location. And you say, okay, who's going to be the best person of my team to handle that part of it, like data. Right. I'm sure in your manual there's specific items and things you need to do to maintain the data of the business. So having the right person that is responsible for that's part of the team, and then knowing what to do, making sure that if there's an earthquake, having somebody in charge of who's going to be communicating with people. I think that's critically important.
Yeah, it's so important. And it's not necessarily the department head. It's not necessarily, the supervisor, the floor supervisor. You're absolutely right. You have to identify the correct people, and you need to first identify what's needed, and then your people. A lot of companies, they'll form committees, and it's by volunteers. So the safety committee attracts a certain group of people versus the fun committee. You don't want the fun committee running your safety plan. People love them. They do wonderful things for your business, but they're not necessarily the people that are going to run your safety committee.
Oh, definitely. I think I'd probably qualify for the fun team.
I would be on the safety committee for sure, and not the fun committee. I will show up and cheerlead, but I am not about to lead that myself.
Well, let's take for a minute and talk about a small business. So small businesses are, I think the number is something like 80% of the businesses out there are small business. And they may not have a group of people that can put together their risk management manual and have the office manual in place. So what would you recommend for somebody that's maybe got one or two people that are in their company and they still need to have this information? They still need to have this plan in place, and they still need to know how they're going to treat their team and how they're going to treat their clients or customers. You got any recommendations for how to put that together if you're a small business?
Definitely. So we are so blessed. We have the internet. There are tons of resources out there. And so, sometimes I'm looking for something that I know someone else has. I just got to go look for some type of template. So one of the best resources is go to the source. That Cal OSHA is the organization that regulates the safety within a workspace. Go to their website. They have lots of information. They tell you what they expect to see. Because if you do get an audit from them, they want to see your manual. And so the best thing to do is build it based on what they expect. And, build it logically, make it fit to your company. You can't just go Google something and print it and then pop it in a binder. You have to customize it to your specific business. And what I have found is most small businesses, they get that. They understand they need it. They might Google something, find it, print it, pop it in a binder, put on a shelf, and never look at it again, if they even get that far. Most small businesses don't take the time to do that because, you can kind of fly by the seat of your pants in that, well, nothing's probably ever going to happen. And that may very well be the case, but the better prepared you can be, the better. And so, in the business that I run, the consulting business I run in addition to my brokerage, that's one of the main requests that I get all the time from brokers is, hey, I know I need a policy and procedure manual. I know I need an employee handbook because I have 3 employees. I don't know where to start. More importantly, they don't have the time to customize it. And so that's the service that I offer. And so, but sometimes, if it's, I have clientele from other industries too. I don't know their business. So I have to rely on what can I find that's specific to their industry, but then it still needs to be tailored. And then that's that's when I need to collaborate with them to make sure that it specifically fits their needs. So
Absolutely.
there's lots of resources.
Well, and then the other thing is, if you're in an industry, I don't want to keep this all about real estate, but if you are a small broker, other small brokers in your community that you could team up with to help distribute some of the labor in part of it, the looking up part and putting the manual together. I mean, and then you have other resources. You have your accountant, or you have your attorney, or whatever, that you can call upon to say, hey, I'm developing this crisis management team. What do I, this is part of it that I need a part of that, and I would like you to be on my team, or something like that, where you are, because it is labor intensive to put something together. And I think you made a very important point, and that is that it has to be reviewed. This cannot be something where you put it all together and you put it on a shelf and you forget it. Because I was in an office, I won't mention any names, but I was in an office that was a large company, and they wanted me to come in. I was actually at an association, and they wanted me to come in and put together a member benefit program for disasters. And I asked them, I said, okay, well, the best way to do that is to be a good example for your membership. And when I asked them about their own disaster plan, their own business continuity plan, they all just stopped talking. They didn't say a word. Right. And it turned out that they had one that somebody put together, like when they pulled it finally out, 11 years previous, and not a single person that was in that plan was even working at the company anymore.
Wow.
So I think it's really important. And the risk management person for this particular association, she was the only one that knew where the first aid kit was. It was because it was under her desk.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good example of how critical it is. And what people don't realize, FEMA has a statistic that they say that 75% of all businesses that are affected by a disaster will be out of business in 2 years.
I believe
they don't have the preparation, if they don't look at their risk management, if they don't mitigate as much as possible. I mean, what can you do to mitigate? Let's take an earthquake as a good example. What can you do to ensure that things are attached to the walls firmly, that they're locked down, where they're not going to go flying places? If you're in a hurricane area, what can you do to improve the chances of having stronger windows, or having a better roof line, or something like that? Tornadoes, having a safe room. And it could be just a bathroom that's been reinforced. I mean, there's things you can do that are very inexpensive, but that's all part. I mean, for a business, the risk factor is if something happens to one of your employees or one of your customers, that's serious business. So whatever you can do to mitigate against that, I think plays a key role in what you
do. And it's so important to recognize that as the business owner, you are liable. And so it's one thing to have the plan and have it in a binder on a shelf under someone's desk and no one knows where it is. It's one thing to have that, but it's another thing to be able to demonstrate that you have communicated and trained. And I know in the real estate space, our errors and omissions insurance would not cover if we as a broker failed to demonstrate and teach the policies and procedures that we have in the binder. And that would be the same in other industries as well. Whatever the insurance is that covers that business, and it could be multiple insurance policies, different types of insurances. If you as the business owner are not providing the training to make sure everyone is in compliance and that everyone is safe because they're trained and they know what to do, they know how to react, you're going to be liable. If you can demonstrate you've done that training, and maybe it should be initially when this person first joins you, and it needs to be ongoing. And in terms of, looking out for the dangers around the building or among the job, you should implement some type of protocol that is an ongoing assessment of that. Now, if it's manufacturing, it's probably a daily assessment. Let's make sure the machines are all operating properly and everyone's wearing the right safety gear. If it's in an office, maybe it's once a quarter, but going through and examining the physical building and the training of the agents or employees or others is really important.
I think that's really, really, really good advice and information, because and you know, people don't think it's going to happen to them, and just because we don't think it's going to happen to us doesn't mean it isn't going to happen to us. And so I think taking that extra step and protecting your business, doing as much as you can to keep the liability as low as you possibly can.
Yeah, you need to keep retraining and re-talking about it, because I don't know how many times you asked me if I personally have my emergency kits, and you know, you hear it once, you're like, yeah. I do have one for my car now. I'm working on the one for my home. I have one for my office, which I have not been in a year except to pick up mail. But you know, that's what it takes, is that constant putting it in front of people to make sure that they understand it, they don't forget it, or they get it done.
Absolutely. Thank you. Congratulations for getting your bag together.
I have my cargo bag. I'm safe if I'm in the car now.
Well, I go back to the whole, it's really, again, it goes back to the mindset, right? Because if you have those bags and you know where they are, and you know when something happens, all you have to do is go and get them and leave.
Yes.
That takes so much stress off of you. A good example is my partner Anna. She lives up in Woodland Hills area, and you guys had a little tiny shaker here a couple weeks ago, and she said, because I've been learning about this now, she says, I knew exactly what. She says, I didn't even think about it. She says, I stood up, my shoes were right by my bed, my feet went into my shoes, I went over, I grabbed my bag, and my brother, her brother is living with her, and he was asleep. And so she went there and she stood there for a minute to see if it was going to keep shaking. And then she was going to wake him up. But she said, I didn't even think about it. I just did it. That's and right. I think that is the secret. When you can get to the point where you just automatically react and are able to go ahead and move forward and just do it, I think that makes all the difference in the world about how well you're going to perform when something does happen. So,
yeah, that's so true. And you know, that is the case in the workspace as well. When you have a well thought out plan that you've practiced, that you've tested, that you've trained people on, when that disaster happens, then you can everybody just immediately goes into the mode they're supposed to go into, and people know what to do. That's why we have fire drills in buildings. And I know everyone hates it. It's so annoying. It's, you know, it's a waste of time. No, it's because we need to be sure that we're ready. And, you know, don't discount the fact that it's the building owner who says, yes, we're going to do this quarterly fire drill because I need to demonstrate as the business owner that I have provided the training, that I've done it on a routine basis, that I'm doing the best that I can to protect my business. And so, yes, it's for us as individuals, but it's also to protect the companies and the building owners, whatever the situation is.
Well, you know, you and I had a conversation, one of our conversations that we do on a monthly basis, and we were talking about, there was a shooting in a real estate office down by you here a while ago. Mm-hmm. And we had this conversation about what can you do to help protect your office space itself. And I think that's also really important. I mean, unfortunately, we don't like talking about this. Nobody wants to talk about it, try to shuffle it underneath the rug. But, you know, in our conversation, I think it's important, and this falls right into risk management. Do you have a plan for if somebody does come through the office or come into the office? What is your plan if there is somebody that has bad ideas about what they're going to do? What are you going to do as far as making sure that other people are aware of what happens? I mean, you might have a receptionist. Is there some way of not blocking the receptionist all the way, but having some kind of floor plan that will prohibit them being able to see further into the office? Or I think all those kinds of things. Today, we have to worry about all of that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah,
What?
and that list of situations, unfortunately, is growing. And so, we try to anticipate all of the possible scenarios, but there's going to be something new, all the time. But the reality is a lot of your plan is probably a duplicate. Based on this scenario, there's a couple of things that need to be done specific to that situation, but probably or possibly 70% of the plan is all the same. It's deal with the situation at hand, make sure everybody's safe, and then here's the steps we do after.
Right, right. And then what you do afterwards is you take a look at, okay, what could have we done to improve our plan or to mitigate something to lower the risk? I think it's important to go back and then look at everything after you've gone through something, whatever it is. Even something as simple as a power outage. I mean, that's something that businesses really need to take into consideration because they're really on the rise. They've risen a lot over the last 10 years. And now you've got electrical company or like the power companies that are now shutting off the power if there's high winds so that there's not a fire after what happened in Paradise, California. A spark from the power lines is what caused that fire that destroyed an entire town. And I don't remember how many lives, but a lot of lives. So what is in your plan to, if there is a fire or if there's a power outage, what are you going to do? Do all businesses have a generator? And is it the kind of generator you can run inside of a building? I mean, those are all things that you need to take into consideration, especially if you're a business that is consumer oriented, where if you're going to keep staying in business, you need to have the electricity on. And as we saw in Texas, that some of those businesses were out of electricity for 3 weeks.
Right.
So what are you going to do when it comes to that? That again is part of what you have to have in that risk management plan. There's so many facets to it. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. It won't be perfect. Having something is a start. And I think it's so important to do that debrief. We do it when we host events, we'll do the debrief. What could have been better? What do we want to do next time around? Well, we need to be doing it with our disasters, even with our safety plans. Go back to the example of the fire drill. I remember one particular fire drill. We were in a smaller building, about 3 stories. But, we had people that were lingering into the back of the parking lot when that was not the group meetup space. So we had to do a debrief to identify, okay, how do we improve that process so we don't have stragglers? These people who just thought, well, I'm just going to go have a cigarette off in the smoking area and no one will notice. Well, it was noticed because we have a plan. And within that plan is taking attendance. That's very important. You need to know who's absent that day too. Because if you're taking attendance and someone is missing, are they missing or are they absent? And so somebody, you need to know your surroundings. I know you talk about this when you talk about the mass shootings, take a look at your surroundings, but you also need to do that within the business space as well. Know who's coming and going. And in our industry, in real estate, agents are independent contractors and they come and go. But hopefully at least one person has seen them enter and exit the building before a disaster, so we know the status, or we know they were there. Can we get on the phone and try to reach them? Hopefully the phones are still working. So it doesn't have to be perfect because you can refine it as you learn, as you attend summits like this where you're learning and you're getting advice from people and from the actual scenarios.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Laura, it's always a pleasure when we get together and chat, and I learned so much from you. It's just amazing. How can people reach out to you and how can they find you?
So the best place is my website, namaziresources.com. I do specialize in real estate, although I did mention I have experience in other industries. And, if nothing else, I'm a great person to just, bounce some ideas off of, because I'm always looking out for what's the next way we're going to get sued. So what can we do to avoid a lawsuit? And with that, lawsuits, insurance issues, but my website, namaziresources.com, or you can find me on social media and we can connect through Coni.
Yeah.
So I always learn so much from you too. We never quite know where the conversation's going. going to go. And this was a good conversation. Thank you for including me today.
Oh, I'm really glad you could join us. And yeah, I like the idea that I'm not one to stick to a strict agenda, because I think the best information sometimes comes when you're just having a conversation and you're heading down a path when you're talking about then what you're supposed to be talking about, rather than what's something on a list.
Right.
So yeah. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for being a part of this. And I can't wait to have our next monthly conversation.
Yes, I'll see you then if I don't see you before. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Bye-bye now.
In the replays.